The morning sun rose slowly over the military base, casting a harsh golden light on the dusty earth and worn concrete buildings that stood like silent sentinels over the sprawling grounds. The air was thick with heat and the faint smell of gunpowder, mixed with sweat and oil. This was a place of discipline and determination, where young Marines came to forge themselves into soldiers ready to face whatever the world might throw at them, among the group of recruits gathered for their morning drills. There was one man who stood apart, not because of his stature, which was average, or his age, which was older than most, but because of the quiet aura of experience that seemed to surround him. He carried an old rifle slung over his shoulder, a weapon that looked like it had survived decades of battle with its wooden stock, cracked and scratched, the metal parts worn and rusted in places. The younger Marines watched him with a mixture of curiosity and amusement. Whispers floated through the air, like a gentle breeze, carrying their disbelief and mockery. They had brand new weapons that gleamed under the sun, rifles that fired with precision and smoothness. But here was this veteran who insisted on carrying this relic of a gun that seemed more like a burden than a tool. They laughed in low voices, catching each other's eyes and sharing jokes about how he must have lost his mind to trust such a broken piece of equipment. One of them even joked loud enough for the veteran to hear. "You sure that thing even works, old-timer? Or are you just going to wave it around like a stick, hoping to scare the enemy?" The veteran said nothing. He only smiled faintly, a smile that held stories deeper than the words the Marines could muster. His eyes scanned the faces of the young soldiers, some full of arrogance, some full of doubt, but none of them truly understood the weight of history that rifle carried as the commanding officer barked orders. The veteran moved with a calm, deliberate pace. His every step seemed measured, as if he was walking through memories as much as the training ground. The other Marines hustled and struggled with their new equipment, but he took his time adjusting the worn strap on his shoulder, checking the sight and feeling the familiar grooves of the trigger beneath his fingers. The ground shook faintly as heavy vehicles rumbled past, and the sharp cracks of distant gunfire echoed from the live fire range. A storm was coming, not from the sky, but from within the hearts of these soldiers. One Marine approached him, finally unable to contain his ridicule. "You think that old thing can take a shot better than mine?" he sneered, trying to provoke a reaction. The veteran looked up and met his gaze, steady and unflinching. "This rifle has seen more fights than you have dreams." The words were low, but carried a weight that silenced the Marine for a moment. Before he could respond, the commanding officer called everyone to attention, signaling the start of the day's drills. The veteran raised his rifle slowly, his fingers tracing the worn wood as if drawing strength from it. The other Marines watched with growing interest as he settled into position at the firing line. His posture was perfect, steady, and sure. Despite the apparent flaws of his weapon, the first few attempts were shaky. The rifle jammed once or twice, the veteran cursed softly under his breath, and the young Marines snickered, thinking their doubts confirmed. But he persisted. Each time. He adjusted his grip, cleaned the barrel, and tested the mechanisms, ignoring the whispers around him. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher, turning the sky a brilliant blue. The veteran's patience was unyielding, his focus absolute. He was not merely preparing to fire a weapon, but readying a story about to be told in a language that only bullets could speak. Then finally it happened. The rifle fired a sharp report, cutting through the noise of the base. The bullet flew true, striking a target downrange, dead center. The Marines froze, their laughter caught in their throats, replaced by stunned silence. The veteran lowered his rifle and glanced at the group of young soldiers watching him with wide eyes. He said quietly, without a hint of triumph, "The shot is never about the gun, but the hands that hold it." And with that, the training ground seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next. The sound of the shot echoed across the training ground like a sudden crack in the calm. The young Marines stood frozen, their eyes wide with disbelief. The veteran lowered the rifle slowly, as if it weighed less than a feather now. His calmness was unshakable, but the air around him was charged with something electric, a tension, that made the hairs on the back of necks stand up. The mocking laughter that had filled the morning air was replaced by a heavy silence, broken only by the distant hum of vehicles and the soft rustle of wind sweeping through the dry grass. The Marines exchanged uncertain glances as if trying to grasp what had just happened. The old rifle had fired with a power and precision no one expected, and the man who wielded it had done so with the confidence of someone who had faced far greater challenges than any of these recruits could imagine. One of the younger Marines stepped forward, his face a mixture of confusion and curiosity. "You really hit that target dead center with that broken rifle. How is that possible?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The veteran did not answer immediately. Instead, he slowly raised the rifle again and checked the worn sights. His hands moved with practiced ease as he prepared to take another shot. The Marines watched breathlessly, waiting to see if it was a fluke or if the old man could do it again. The rifle jammed. The veteran cursed softly, his fingers working quickly to clear the malfunction. The younger Marines held their breath, some smirking, thinking their doubts justified. But the veteran remained focused, calm and unyielding. He pulled the trigger once more, and the rifle barked a fierce report. The bullet flew swift and true, striking the target again in the exact same spot. The Marines could hardly believe their eyes. They had never seen such mastery with such a flawed weapon. It was as if the veteran and the rifle were one entity, bound by an unspoken understanding, forged in fire and battle. A ripple of respect passed through the crowd as the veteran lowered the rifle again. His gaze swept over the faces before him, some now filled with awe, others still struggling to believe. The commanding officer stepped forward and nodded approvingly. "This is what true skill looks like," he said, his voice firm and commanding. Not the shine of new gear or the flash of high tech, but the steady hand and clear mind that knows the value of every shot. The veteran allowed himself a small smile. A story was beginning to unfold, a story of endurance and hidden strength that these young soldiers would carry with them far beyond the training grounds. But the veteran knew this was only the beginning. The rifle held secrets not just of battles past, but of lessons that would shape the very souls of these Marines as the sun climbed. Higher, the veteran shared a few words about patience and focus, about understanding your weapon and yourself. He spoke quietly, but each word struck like a hammer, shaping the minds of those listening. The broken rifle was no longer just a piece of equipment. It had become a symbol of resilience and respect. Yet even as the Marines absorbed these lessons, there was a lingering question that hung in the air. What was the true story behind that rifle? Why had the veteran clung to it all these years, despite its flaws? What battles had it witnessed, and what sacrifices did it represent? The veteran remained silent on those questions, his eyes distant as if looking into a past that few could follow. He packed away the rifle, carefully wrapping it in a worn cloth that seemed as old as the weapon itself. The Marines watched in quiet reverence, sensing that they had been given a glimpse of something sacred. As the training day drew to a close, the veteran stood alone for a moment, watching the horizon where the sky met the earth in a fiery blaze of orange and red. The air was thick with promise and challenge. The Marines had laughed at a broken rifle, but now they faced the truth that sometimes strength was hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be revealed in moments that tested the spirit. The veteran turned away from the setting sun, his figure silhouetted against the fading light, a silent guardian of stories untold and lessons learned. The question remained, will these young Marines remember the shot that silenced their laughter, or will they forget in the rush of days to come? The wind whispered through the empty training ground, carrying with it the echo of a shot fired and a challenge made. A challenge to see beyond appearances and find the power that lies in perseverance and heart. And somewhere in the quiet, the broken rifle waited patiently ready for the next moment to prove its worth and silence the doubts once more. The morning after the shot that had silenced, the laughter dawned quiet and heavy with expectation. The veteran arrived early at the training ground carrying his worn rifle like an old friend that had stood by him through countless trials. The young Marines gathered around their new gear and whispered, still unsure if what they had witnessed was real or some trick of fate. The veteran took his place at the firing line and glanced once more at the battered weapon as if drawing strength from its cracked wood and rusty metal. It was more than a tool. It was a repository of memory and battle scars, each one telling a story of survival, endurance, and sacrifice. The rifle was a living testament to the veteran's journey and his refusal to surrender to time or circumstance. The Marines watched with a mixture of awe and skepticism as the veteran raised the rifle to his shoulder and steadied his breath. His movements were deliberate, measured, and full of the quiet confidence that comes from years of hard-fought experience. The younger soldiers could feel a shift in the air as if the ground itself was holding its breath. The veteran pulled the trigger and a sharp crack split the silence. The bullet sped toward the target, flying faster than the eye could follow. It struck the center of the distant target again, but this time the sound seemed to carry a deeper meaning. The Marines exchanged glances, uncertain what to make of this display of skill from a broken rifle. Suddenly a murmur spread through the group. Questions bubbled up like a rising tide. Why did this man carry a rifle so old and damaged? How could it perform so well when newer weapons failed? Were they missing something in their understanding of strength and reliability? Veteran lowered the rifle slowly and looked at the faces around him. His eyes held a quiet challenge, as if daring them to look beyond the surface. The rifle was not just a weapon. It was a lesson in resilience, in finding power in imperfection, and in mastering the tools life gave you, no matter how flawed they seemed. One Marine stepped forward, hesitant but driven by a mix of respect and curiosity. "Tell us the story of this rifle," he said, his voice steady but full of questions. The veteran nodded and began to speak, his voice low and steady. The rifle had been his companion through battles that most of these young Marines could only imagine. It had been battered and broken in fights that had tested every ounce of his will. It had saved his life and the lives of his comrades more than once, and it had taught him that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in the weapon itself, but in the hands that wield it. As he spoke, the Marines listened intently. The story unfolded like a tapestry, woven with threads of bravery, pain, and unyielding hope. The rifle had once belonged to a comrade who had fallen in battle, and the veteran had vowed to carry it forward as a tribute to that sacrifice. Each scratch and dent was a reminder of the cost of freedom and the price of courage. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the training ground. The veteran's words painted pictures of distant deserts and dense jungles, of firefights and quiet moments of reflection. His story was not just about war, but about survival and honor, about the bond between a soldier and his weapon, about the lessons learned in the crucible of combat. The Marines felt the weight of history settle over them as the veteran finished his tale. Silence deeper than any before enveloped the group as they absorbed the meaning behind the rifle and the man who carried it. The broken rifle was no longer just a relic. It was a symbol of endurance and respect. But even as the silence held there was a lingering tension, a question that refused to fade. What would happen if the veteran were called to fight once more? Could the broken rifle stand the test of real combat, or was it only a testament to past glories? The veteran sensed the unspoken, doubt in the eyes of the young soldiers, but he did not speak of the future. Instead, he packed the rifle away with care, a ritual as familiar as breathing, and stepped back into the ranks, ready for whatever challenge lay ahead. The Marines stood watching, the figure of the veteran framed against the brightening sky. They had come to see a broken rifle and an old man. They were leaving with a lesson etched deep into their souls about strength, humility, and the unbreakable spirit of those who endure, and somewhere beneath the surface of that quiet morning, the broken rifle waited patiently for the moment when it would once again prove that true power lies not in perfection, but in the courage to carry on. The days that followed the veterans' demonstration were filled with a quiet tension as the Marines struggled to reconcile what they had witnessed with their own beliefs about strength and skill. The barracks buzzed with whispered conversations and stolen glances toward the old rifle that now rested in the veterans' quarters like a sacred relic. The once loud laughter was replaced by a mixture of respect, curiosity, and a creeping unease. The veteran moved among the young soldiers with a calm certainty. His presence was like an anchor in a storm, steady and unyielding, yet wrapped in an air of mystery. The Marines who had once mocked him now found themselves drawn to his stories and the lessons he shared about resilience, discipline, and the true meaning of strength. One afternoon, a group of Marines gathered near the firing range, determined to understand the secret behind the broken rifle's remarkable performance. They asked the veteran to show them how to care for their weapons, how to find balance and focus in the chaos of battle. He agreed without hesitation and began a series of lessons that would challenge everything they thought they knew. The veteran taught them that weapons were not merely tools, but extensions of their own will and spirit, that to master a rifle was to master oneself. He showed them how to listen to the rhythm of the gun, how to feel the pulse of the trigger, and to read the subtle signs of wear and fatigue that told the story of the weapon's soul. As the lessons continued, the Marines began to see the rifle not as a broken piece of equipment, but as a symbol of perseverance and trust. They learned to respect the scars and dents as marks of survival and proof of battles won and lost. The veterans' quiet wisdom seeped into their hearts, reshaping their understanding of what it meant to be a Marine. But even as the bond between the soldiers and the rifle deepened, there was a shadow hanging over the training ground, a shadow of doubt and fear about the battles to come and whether the lessons learned here would be enough to prepare them for the horrors of war. The veterans sensed this unease and knew that the real test was still ahead. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, the veteran gathered the Marines around the old rifle laid out carefully on a worn blanket. He spoke softly, recounting the sacrifices that had been made and the price of freedom. His voice carried the weight of years and the quiet strength of a man who had faced death and come back to tell the tale. The Marines listened in silence, their eyes reflecting the fading light and the heavy burden of responsibility now resting on their shoulders. They understood that the rifle was more than a weapon. It was a legacy, a challenge and a promise to those who had fallen before them. As the night deepened, a cool breeze swept through the camp, carrying with it the scent of earth and sweat, and the distant sound of a howling wind somewhere far away. The veteran looked out into the darkness, his gaze steady and unwavering. He knew that the moment to prove the true power of the broken rifle was drawing near. The Marines exchanged nervous glances, wondering if they could live up to the example set before them, if they had the courage to carry forward the spirit of resilience and honor embodied in that battered weapon. The silence was thick with anticipation and unspoken questions. Would the broken rifle stand strong in the fires of real combat? Would the lessons learned in peace hold firm when faced with chaos and death? Could the veteran and his weapon silence the doubts and fears that lingered like ghosts on the edge of their minds? The night stretched on with a heavy stillness, as if the world itself was waiting for the answer. The broken rifle lay quietly resting in the hands of the man who had sworn to defend not just the land, but the values it stood for. The old soldier's silhouette was etched against the stars, guardian of memories and a beacon of hope in uncertain times, and somewhere deep within that quiet darkness, a promise was made. A promise that no matter what trials lay ahead, the spirit of the broken rifle and the man who carried it would not be broken. But the question remained unanswered, waiting for the moment when it would finally be put to the ultimate test. The dawn broke with a pale light filtering through the thin clouds, casting long shadows over the training ground. The veteran stood, alone near the edge of the field, his old rifle cradled gently in his hands, as if it were more than just wood and metal, but a living memory waiting to be honored. Around him, the young Marines prepared for the day, their faces marked by a new seriousness that had replaced the earlier mockery. The veteran began to speak quietly, his voice carrying across the silent field, telling the story of the rifle and the men who had carried it before him. He spoke of battles fought in distant lands, where the heat was suffocating and the nights were filled with danger. Each scratch and dent was a scar of survival, each worn groove a testament to unwavering resolve. The rifle had saved lives and taken lives, and through it all it had never lost its purpose or its power. The Marines listened, closely drawn in by the weight of the history and the solemn pride in the veteran's tone. They saw the rifle in a new light, no longer broken, but sacred, a symbol of sacrifice, endurance, and honor. The story forged a bond between the past and the present, between the man and the soldiers who would carry on the fight. Then the veteran looked up, his eyes meeting the gaze of each Marine as if passing on a silent challenge. "You must understand," he said, "no matter what weapon you carry or what battles you face, the true strength lies in your courage, your discipline, and your heart, not in the shine of your gun or the number of rounds you fire." A heavy silence followed the words as the Marines absorbed the lesson, deeper than any drill or command. The veteran carefully handed the rifle to one of the younger soldiers, a test and a trust wrapped in a weathered grip. The Marine took it hesitantly, his hands trembling slightly, but determination shining in his eyes. In that moment, the broken rifle was no longer the old man's burden, but a legacy passed on, a symbol of resilience and unyielding spirit that would live on through those who honored it.